because we're going to talk about a very complicated situation. Is it a Canadian capitulation or a brilliant 3D chess move the rest of us will figure out eventually? The Canadian government has announced the cancellation of the digital services tax, which would have required U.S. tech giants like Amazon, Google, and Meta to pay around $2 billion in retroactive taxes. The move, a major reversal, now, of course, aiming to restart stalled economic and security negotiations with the United States. And apparently, it had the intended effect. The U.S. saying, yep, they will restart those negotiations. Of course, it all began on Friday with a social media post from Donald Trump announcing an end to trade talks unless that DST, digital services tax, went away. Let's talk to Jean Charest about this. He's the former Premier of Quebec, and he's a member of the Prime Minister's Council on Canada-U.S. relations. Happy Canada Day, Monsieur Charest.
Elias, thank you, and happy Canada to you and all your listeners. It's an opportunity to remember how lucky we are to be citizens of this country.
Absolutely.
We won the lottery of citizenship, Elias.
We did. We won. That's the best way of putting it, right? The lottery of all the countries on the planet. We won the lottery.
Yeah.
Now, I can call you Jean for this interview, right? I've always wanted to be your best friend. That's okay, right?
Well, right now, Donald Trump is my new best friend.
Okay.
He's keeping me very busy. But you know what? You're welcome to be my best friend. I'd be delighted.
Let's dive into that, right? And let's start off, Jean, with what you just said. Well, why is Donald Trump your best friend right now? Tell me about that aspect.
Well, I say that jokingly because he's been keeping me extremely busy. I'm on the advisory council of the Prime Minister, which Mr. Trudeau had named me to, and Mr. Carney has maintained. And I'm also on a business advisory committee, and I work for the law firm of Terrien Couture Jolicoeur, and I have a lot of clients, and I do panels and speeches and presentations. So Mr. Trump has become a big part of my life. And when I make speeches, I joke that I should have a trumpeton in my office where it could go off every time he makes a new statement. And I've given speeches, Elias, where telling people what the policies of the Trump administration is twice. I've had people get up in the room during the speech and say, Mr. Charest, he's just tweeted something.
Wow. I bet you're dangerously close to creating a Truth Social account, aren't you?
I'm resisting. I'm resisting.
I have to ask you this, right? Scrapping the digital services tax. Did we capitulate? Did we bend over to the United States? What's your take on that?
Not an easy decision, but I don't see it as capitulation. First of all, there's a long story to this, 10 years old. It started at the OECD, which wanted countries to collectively, together, deal with two issues. One was a low tax base, the fact that a number of countries deliberately lowered their corporate taxes to attract head offices and their profits to their jurisdictions, Ireland being the main culprit within the European Union. And so the OECD said, all of us should get together and have a minimum tax, which would be at about 15%, which is ultimately, very reasonable in our country. So that all these multinationals would at least, whatever the circumstances, pay at least 15%. Then the second issue, Elias, was a digital services tax, and saying, well, we have all these multinationals that sell publicity, they sell services in our countries, but and they don't have any head offices, they don't have a physical presence, and they should also, for the services they receive, they should pay a minimum tax, and that's where the idea comes from. A number of countries have done it. Canada had had a long debate about it. It was in 2021 where the legislation first appeared. And the reason why it goes back to 2022 is that it was sort of on the books but not voted on until 2024. And then in 2024 it was voted on, retroactive to 2022, which is exceptional, but not exceptional in the sense that the companies knew from 2021 on that the government of Canada wanted to do this. Now, this was an issue for the Biden administration, who objected to it, and the Trump administration also. In fairness to them, they said, listen, we don't agree with this, and so, but it wasn't high on their list of things that they were raising in the discussions that negotiations we were having until Donald Trump pulled out this rabbit out of his hat last Friday and said, well, we object to this and we're going to cut off the negotiations. So, and interesting. And by the way, you say, capitulate. Last week, the Americans are debating this big, beautiful bill, their budget bill.
Yep.
They had a section in the bill, 889 was the number of the section, that would have imposed taxes on companies and countries like Canada who had a digital services tax, and they withdrew it unilaterally last week. Scott Bessent, the Secretary of the Economy, Treasury, withdrew it. So they had already, on their part, withdrew their section. And so in the bigger scheme of things, it's not unreasonable. And yes, it is, it's not what we would have preferred. But why is Mark Carney doing this? Because there is a bigger prize here, and that's to keep the Americans at the table negotiating to get an agreement by the 21st of July. That's the real objective. At the end of the day, Elias, that's what we are striving to achieve, and that's what if you put it in other words, he's saying to the country, let's focus on this and make sure we don't lose sight of that objective, because that's what we really need to do if we're going to get through this period.
With Jean Charest, former Premier of Quebec and member of the Prime Minister's Council on Canada-U.S. relations. With that in mind, Jean, you mentioned July 21st, so we got 3 weeks here. And I think some of the worry is, although you outline why perhaps it was the right move to make here, I think the worry is if we'll go back on the DST, well, what if they ask about supply management? What if they ask about other things? And how far will Canada be willing to go to get a deal with the clock ticking to July 21st? How far will Canada go?
And Donald Trump raised supply management in his posting last week. So this is also an issue for the Americans. And the story on supply management is this. There is a very solid political consensus among the federal parties that we are going to maintain supply management. It was discussed during the federal campaign. Prime Minister Carney made mention of it in his speech from the throne, reiterated the position of the Government of Canada. The Parliament of Canada has just approved a piece of legislation that was promoted by the Bloc Québécois to take supply management off the table in negotiations. And the other thing that is extremely relevant to this is that Donald Trump legitimized, supply management in the negotiations of 2018. He signed an agreement, this update of what we now call CUSMA, or trade agreement between Mexico, Canada, and the United States, in which he recognized supply management. And the last part of it, and the most important, Elias, is that Americans also have sectors that they protect. They have a tariff wall for sugar that's 300% high, and they have a farm bill and farm bills that they put forward every single year that generously support the agricultural sector in the United States. They have the Jones Act and the Maritime Act. I mean, every country in the world, Elias, I mean, if we shouldn't be religious about this, every country in the world has sections or parts of their economy that they want to protect. For the Japanese, it's rice. And for us, it's supply management. So on that issue, there isn't a lot of wiggle room for the Government of Canada. There isn't actually no wiggle room. And so we're very clear on that in regards to where we're going to end up.
I got to leave it there. I want to wish you again a happy Canada Day, and thanks for sharing it with our listeners across the country.
And have a glass of milk today to celebrate supply management.
And let me tell you, 3.8% fat milk. Let me tell you, that's what I'm doing.
You're kidding. I mean, aren't you putting on weight?
No, it's the good organic stuff. I got to go, Mr. Charest. Jean, thanks so much.
Take care.
That's the former Premier of Quebec, Jean Charest.